the stories, the journey, the wild behind the scenes, and much more. I'm Dave Anthony, and I'm the host of From Garage to Stadiums. The fall of 1970, Led Zeppelin III comes out. Page and Plant decide to rent a cottage called Bronner Eyre to write the songs for the next album. And the music on it was a mixture of a variety of folk and Celtic music, along with some heavy-hitting tunes like the Immigrant Song, but mixed in with these Celtic and folk tunes like Bronner Eyre Stomp. Led Zeppelin IV was released on November 8th, 1971. It was a blank album cover as the band wished to be anonymous, except for symbols that were meant to represent each member of the band. It was called Led Zeppelin IV to fans because of the four symbols on the sides, but also because it was the fourth album by the band. Led Zeppelin IV is one of the best-selling albums in history, selling over 23 million copies by 2006. It featured songs like Black Dog, Rock and Roll, a slower acoustic tune, Going to California, and the mammoth hit that we talked about at the beginning of the show, Stairway to Heaven. Houses of the Holy was their fifth album, and it was released on March 28th, 1973. It used more experimented sounds, such as the Mellotron orchestration and synthesizers, which effectively gave kind of a synthesizer or organ feel to some of the tunes. That featured Over the Hills and Far Away, Maker, and a song called The Ocean. The ensuing tours of Houses of the Holy broke concert box office records. Led Zeppelin were truly kings of the stadiums. Crowds of 50,000 in Atlanta, 55,000 in Tampa typified the excitement of the public to get access to this band. Physical Graffiti was released on February 24th, 1975, the band's sixth studio album. It was actually a double album and featured a song called Kashmir. Another song, according to John Paul Jones, the bassist, was inspired by Stevie Wonder, and it was called Trampled Underfoot. A variety of albums obviously continue to be released. The concert tours get bigger and bigger, but some things start to emerge in the mid to late 70s that start to preclude something else that is going to happen with this band. Can you just talk about a few of the things that start to emerge from the relentless touring and the lifestyle?
Yeah, well, I mean, drugs and alcohol took over. And that was a big problem for Led Zeppelin. Jimmy got involved in heroin. Robert dabbled, got out of it quickly enough. He was in a horrendous car accident with his wife.
In 1975, I think you wrote, yep.
Yes, in which she almost died. In fact, she had died, and doctors were able to bring his wife back from death. Things began to pile up. Bonzo was a huge problem on the road. He had an enormous temper that would arise from nothing at all. If you looked at Bonzo the wrong way, you might get punched out. He would break things. He would destroy a room for absolutely no reason. He would punch somebody in the face for no reason. Alcohol was his nemesis. He couldn't control himself. It really interfered with everything that the band was doing. There were nights that Jimmy was so messed up that if he was playing his double neck guitar, he might have chorded on one neck, but strummed another neck, not knowing that he wasn't making any sound. And his playing got sloppy. If you listen to a lot of the tapes that come out of those dates, Jimmy was known as one of the sloppiest guitar players around. And that was an enormous shame for a guy who was such a gorgeous, gorgeous guitar player growing up. It was very difficult.
Mm-hmm. The 77 tour starts setting records in terms of attendance at various arenas and stadiums across the U.S. and really brings to mind how popular they were in the U.S. versus England. Can you explain why this band is almost considered like a U.S. treasure at some levels, yet they're from England, and UK fans don't see them at quite in the same light. Maybe they do now, but in those days, they were still way ahead in the U.S.
Well, yeah, it was very easy. In England, England's music, publicity for music is controlled really by the music weeklies, by NME, New Musical Express, Melody Maker, Disc and Music Echo, and a few others. Later on, Uncut and Mojo. And Led Zeppelin would not do interviews with these guys. So the people in the fans in the UK just didn't hear about them as much. Also, there were so few big arenas to play in the UK. There was Wembley, of course, and there was Earl's Court, which was an indoor kind of arena comparable to Madison Square Garden, but really no other big arenas. So Peter Grant kept them out of the UK. I mean, he had them tour the States over and over and over again, where they could play to crowds of 50,000 and 80,000 people and get paid in cash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was another element. They got paid in pure cash. So Grant would leave with suitcases of bills after the show from the gate receipts. It's incredible.
Right. Taxes were rarely paid.
One of the things that happened on the 77 tour was violence started to become a regular occurrence at shows. Behind the scenes, Bonham and members of the band beat up a promoter, Bill Graham's staff. Like these things, the bad karma starts adding up to the point where something extremely tragic happens. And on July 26, 1977, Robert Plant's 5-year-old son, Carrick, dies from a stomach virus. What did this do to the band?
Well, it turned them inside out. Robert never recovered. He really didn't. I mean, he came back and sang with them again, but he was a different man. He stopped drinking. He stopped taking drugs. His heart wasn't in it anymore. He was really finished with Jimmy. There would be nights on the stage where Jimmy had stepped out to do a solo that lasted for 7 or 8 minutes, and you could see Robert just throwing up his hands on the side of the stage, not knowing what to do with himself anymore. And so it was only a matter of time, I believe, that until Robert really had had enough and walked out and did something on his own. But he never, of course, got that opportunity.
Right. And so the last real album they produced is this 1979 album, In Through the Outdoor, and heroin plays a huge role because Page isn't as much of a part of the studio creating the songs. It's now moved to John Paul Jones and Robert Plant playing a bigger role in the production.
Exactly right.
And there it leads to songs like All My Love, which was written by Plant, inspired by the death of his son. In the Evening was another hit, Fool in the Rain off that. But then in 1980, Bob, the end is really here with something that obviously happens to John Bonham.
Yeah, well, Bonzo really goes off on a tangent one night. He drinks like 40 vodkas. He does a lot of dope. He goes to I guess he was at Jimmy's house. He was staying at Jimmy's house in Kensington, and went upstairs to sleep. And the same thing happened to Bonzo that happened to Jimi Hendrix. He aspirated and choked on his own vomit and died. A tragic, senseless death. One could say that Bonzo was always headed in that direction, but he usually was able to pull himself out of it. It just seemed that he was like on a collision course with death. And at that point, all the sail was taken out of, all the wind was taken out of Led Zeppelin's sails. They just decided that without Bonzo, they couldn't go on.
Mm-hmm. And that's really, I guess, they never really considered a replacement, it sounds like.
Not at all. In fact, they got together the day afterwards, and everyone was agreed that was the end of it. I think Robert had had enough. There was no way that he was going to come back And I think that Jimmy was in bad enough shape that he realized he had to do something about his health. And so continuing with Led Zeppelin was just a non-starter, and that was the end of the band.